I don't want to use the words that it's always a pleasure to come back and speak here, because we keep waiting every year that we don't have to have a Yom Iyun about Tisha B'Av. But to come back every year and see all the women that gather together on a busy summer afternoon. I assume many of you have been here since the morning hours, and you took care of your babysitting and you sent the kids off to camp. To get some chizuk during these days, when all of Klal Yisrael needs chizuk. There's not a single person amongst Klal Yisrael that doesn't need chizuk on a daily basis, who doesn't need clarity, who doesn't need to hear the words of Torah, of Chazal. There's not a single Jew in the entire world that is not struggling, trying to understand what is the Chorban all about. And to see a room filled with women that dedicated a day to growth and introspection and meaning, to make these days count, so that perhaps HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks down on Pico Robertson and the women that came from all over Los Angeles and says, if that's what Klal Yisrael looks like without a Beis HaMikdash, could you imagine what they would look like with a Beis HaMikdash? If the women in Los Angeles, California will come together to learn Torah when there's no Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash, imagine what they'll look like when there are Kohanim and their Korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks and has such a nachas ruach, such a pleasure from the ladies who assembled here today, then perhaps we will be zeicha that we don't have to sit on the floor come Motzi Shabbos and Sunday, because Hashem will have already rebuilt the Beis HaMikdash in the schos and the merit of the Nashim Tzidkaniyos, of the righteous women of Klal Yisrael. Chazal tell us that every single person is a microcosm of the Beis HaMikdash. All of the Kedusha which existed inside those holy walls, the Shechina that permeated, the Avodah, the hard work that went into it. Every single one of us that are sitting here today, we are no less than that which took place inside of the Beis HaMikdash, the temple itself. And if the Beis HaMikdash is lying in ruins for already 2,000 years, and we know that when Chazal tell us that a generation that the Beis HaMikdash was not rebuilt in, it's ki'ilu, it's as if that generation was machriv, destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. It must mean that if we are a parallel to the Beis HaMikdash, and we are the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash, and the Shechina would like to reside inside of us like it did inside of the Beit HaMikdash, then it must mean that as much as the stones are still lying in ruins, as much as we are looking up at the Temple Mount, and instead of seeing the beauty of the Beit HaMikdash, we have to see the ugliness of that golden throne. It must be then that Klal Yisrael is still a nation that is lying in spiritual ruins as well. Because if we would have rebuilt ourselves over all of these years, if we would have made ourselves a living Beis HaMikdash that the Shechina could rest in and feel comfortable in, and say, V'shechanti b'seicham, I will dwell inside of you, you are my home, then certainly HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have built his home again for Klal Yisrael. So perhaps the approach that we have to take during these final days before Tisha B'Av is to figure out how could we repair, and how could we rebuild, and how could we undo the Chorban, the destruction that is there inside of us. The Torah tells us in last week's Parsha, Eila Masei V'nei Yisrael. These are the travels, the journeys of Klal Yisrael. Asher Yatzu Me'ez Mitzrayim L'tzivaisam, when they left the land of Egypt, Biyad Moshe v'Aaron, in the hands of Moshe and Aaron. And all the Mefarshim asked the very famous question. HaKadosh Baruch Hu now goes and he explains to us once again the 42 travels and the journeys of the Jewish people in the Midbar, in the wilderness. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ink is very holy. And it's very valuable. It costs a lot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu never ever writes even one extra letter in the Torah that he doesn't need. That means every single word that is recorded in the Torah HaKadosh is the holiest of holy. And Hashem decided I have no choice but to write these words down inside of my Torah. So the commentators ask, if you read the Chumash from the time of the Exodus of Yetzias Mitzrayim until this moment where Klal Yisrael is standing on the edge of going into Eretz Yisrael, you can look back and you can make the calculations. You'll see all of the journeys that Klal Yisrael took. We know we went from here to there, from there to here. Sometimes 2 months, sometimes 2 years, sometimes 1 week, sometimes overnight. You can just go back and review the Chumash like we do every single year, and you'll see all of the journeys that Klal Yisrael took. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu find it necessary to give us an entire parsha, pasuk after pasuk, many, many verses, to tell us over again everything that we know already, all of the travels of Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar for 40 years? There are 3 beautiful answers that I'd like to share with you. And from here we will see the magnificent opportunities that each and every one of us has in our own Avodas Hashem. Rashi explains with his beautiful mashal, the parable. Why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us once again everywhere that we traveled? He says, like a king who took his son. The son was ill. They had to travel very, very far away to go to the best doctor. And they went and he was healed. And then on the way back, the father wants his son to know how difficult the journey was. So he shows him, over here we slept, it was a little bit peaceful. Over there you were cold, you were in pain. Over there your head was splitting, headache. It was Yisurim. You can imagine how much you were suffering. Says the Maharal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was teaching us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Klal Yisrael that I was with you every single step of the way in the Midbar, in the wilderness. As difficult as it looked, and as hard as the challenges were, I want you to know, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I never let go of your hand for a minute. I love you so much, says Hashem. I want to tell you, and I want to share with you, and I want to allow you to understand just how much I care about you. That's the first way that Rashi says. The Sforno writes over here the following. Rotza hakel yizborach sheyichtavu masei Yisrael. Hashem wanted to write over all the journeys once again. Lahaidiya zechusam belechtam acharav b'midbar. To inform us of the great merits that we had, that we followed HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the wilderness, be'eretz leizarua, to a land that was unplanted and unyielded. We had no idea where we were going. Ba'oifin sha'yuroyim lihikones la'aretz, and since that we followed HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we showed HaKadosh Baruch Hu how much we trust Him, how much we love Him, how much we believe in Him and we think about Him. Hashem said that in the merit that you followed me, That's why you are zeicher right now at this moment to go into the land of Israel. So Rashi says HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to know how much Hashem loves us. And the Sforno says HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to know how much He appreciates, how much we love Him. And the Or Chaim HaKadosh writes over here, how did Hashem know sometimes they were there only overnight on their journeys? You know, it was very difficult. You know what it was like to unpack. You go on vacation, summer vacation. You pack for like 1 week, like you're going away for the rest of your life. You know, you go to the airport and you have like 17 suitcases for 3 people. Yeah, all the women are waving yes. They know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you get to the final, you spend all this money, all this time, you go to the Airbnb, you unpack, you get everything ready. The next thing you know, it's time to leave. Could you imagine 3 million Jews traveling through the desert? Imagine you have 10 people in your family, 5 people in the family. Try to get 5 people out the door at the same time. 3 million Jews traveling through the wilderness. And they have to unpack everything when they get there, the Mishkan and the Machanais, the encampments, everything. And they get comfortable, they set up. And 2 days later, Hashem says, okay, it's time to leave. And sometimes they went to a certain place, and Hashem said, for 1 year, 2 years, He didn't say a word, they stayed right where they were. And even one of the encampments was like 17 years they stayed in one place. Ask the Or Chaim HaKadosh, how did Hashem know this place a few days, this place a few months, this place a few years? And he writes, because in every single place that the Jewish people will go in this world, there are sparks of Kedusha that they must pull out of that particular place in their life. And in certain places, there was a lot of Kedusha to pull out, and Hashem said you have to stay there for a long time. And in other places that they went, a small amount. And He said, therefore, 1 night is good enough. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu recounts all of the Masais, all of the travels to remind us that the mission of a Jew in this world is that wherever you go in life, your purpose is to bring out the Kedusha, the holiness and the sanctity in that event, in that situation, and more importantly, inside of yourselves. Eilu ve'eilu ve'eilu divri Elokim Chaim. These are all 3 the words of the Ribbono Shel Olam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends us on a journey in this world because He loves us and He will take care of us and He will be by our side all of the time. And at the same time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to see how much do we love Hashem? How much are we willing to be moiser nefesh, to sacrifice ourselves for our tremendous love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? But when a person thinks to themselves that the reason of my mission, the purpose that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought me to this world is because everywhere I go, everything that I go through in life, every person that I will meet, every child that I will raise, every husband or wife that I will have, everything that I have in my life, in every situation, it is to bring out the greatest zechus, the greatest kedusha, the holiness and the sanctity that is there inside of me. To bring out the kedusha that are in my children. To bring out the kedusha that is in my spouse. Rabbi Akiva only became a Rabbi Akiva, like the Gemara tells us, because his wife, the daughter of the most prestigious, wealthiest man of the generation, Nagdima ben Gurion, Akaba ben Savua, she looks out and she sees the shepherd boy Akiva, Am Haaretz Gamor, doesn't know a word of Torah, doesn't know anything. But she saw the most beautiful midot. She saw his nature. She saw how refined he was. And she said, if I will marry that man, he will become a tzaddik. I just saw somebody the other night. One of my Talmidos in Beis Yaakov got married several years ago. And when I met her and her husband for the first time, I have to tell you quite frankly, I was very surprised. I thought to myself, you could have done so much better. You could have got such a tzaddik of a young man. This is the guy that you married? I never said anything. I wouldn't be that cruel. I was very nice, smiled, wished them mazel tov. I would see them from time to time. A few nights ago, I bumped into this fellow. I did not recognize him. I'm looking at him, he's saying, Rabbi Horowitz, Rabbi Horowitz. I'm looking, who is this man? There's a guy, his face is relaxed. He's shining like a light. He's got ruchnius. I'm looking, he says, I'm such and such. Oh, wow. And I looked at him and said, are you learning Torah? And he looks at me like this, and he says, every day, Rabbi. And he begins telling me about this program that he's in. He's learning in the morning, he's learning in the afternoon, he's learning at nights. I said, you go home and you tell your wife, whatever she's doing, she is doing an amazing job. Because you look like a different person than when you got married. That's our job in this world. Our job in this world is to pull out the kedusha, the holiness, in ourselves, in other people, in the situation that we find ourselves in. And that is the way in which we are going to build ourselves, build our families, build our spouses, build our kehilas, build Klal Yisrael. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides, I'm going to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Where do we start? The Rabbi Yoina, who is famous for Shari Tshuva, has another less well-known sefer called Shari Ha'avodah. And he writes in there the following words. HaPesach HaRishayin Hu. The first opening, the pathway. Sheyada, for a person to be able to achieve, to accomplish, to become something special. Sheyada ha'ish ha'oived, for the person who wants to serve Hashem, is they must know Eirech Atzmai, they must know their personal value. They must know their self-worth. They must know the potential that is inside of them, what they could accomplish. V'yakir malosai, they should see all of their fine points, all of their strengths. Don't look at the bad things. It's so easy to look at the bad. You know why it takes a woman about 2 hours to get dressed for a chasana? Every man learns that on the first Sheva brachas of their life. They're ready to go, they put on their suit, they tie, it's not even straight. They're running out the door and they look, where's their wife? She's got 17 dresses on the bed. No, I'm not in the mood for that one today. She tries it on, no, I don't like the way that I look. Blue, I don't know. Finally, at the end, she goes back to the one she pulled out first. Why does it take so long? Because when you look in the mirror, all you see is all the things that are not right with you. Not right with your clothes. Not right with your hair. Oh, you're Baruch Hashem, you are proud, tichel caring members. So you don't have to worry so much about what it's like to put on that sheitel for the first time. Ribono shel olam, they should give every chassan a class that he understands what it means for a woman who's covering her hair for the first time to have to get used to the look of the sheitel, which is not her hair, it's some Indian hair someplace in the world. It takes hours. Takes forever. Why? Because when a person looks in the mirror, all you see are the blemishes, the things that are wrong with you. Says Rabbi Yoina, you can't look in the mirror to understand and recognize yourself. You have to look inside of yourself and see the Eirech the value that you have. The milos, the strengths. the positive aspects of who you are. Your intuition, your bina yasera, your smarts, your charisma, your understanding, your sensitivity, your compassion. You have to see all of that's inside of you. Umaylas avaisav. And don't forget where you come from. Avais HaKadoshim, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel, Leah, Sarah, Rivka. All of them that we have inherited their greatness. Ugadlusam, V'chashivusam, V'chibasam, Eitzel Abari Yisbarach. The tremendous love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for each and for every one of us. Don't look in the mirror and see that it's a little too tight over here, a little this. Forget about that. Look in the real mirror of who you truly are and recognize all of the goodness, the strengths, the qualities, the high points of who you are. And know that for all of the good that you are, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He loves you more than you could imagine. As the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us, Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem. Man is beloved because we're created in Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Chaviv in Yisrael. But Klal Yisrael is even more beloved. Shenikru Banim Lamakom, because we are called Banim. We are the children of the Ribono Shel Olam. And Rabbi Kotler makes this point over here, that it's too easy to see the faults, the smallness, the things that you are lacking, the things that you don't accomplish. However, Chayiv Adam Lizboinen, a person is obligated to think, Ulahakir, to recognize, HaChashivos HaGedola Sheyesh Boi Be'atzmusai, the greatness that is inside each and every one of you. And if you will recognize the greatness that you have, the more you see your goodness and your intrinsic value and worth, that's how great you will be in your own eyes. The reason that we don't accomplish, the reason that we're not willing to go out on a limb and try something that we never did before, the reason that there's mitzvahs that are lying in our closet for years that we said, well, I'll get it next year, then no, I'm not ready for it yet, not ready for it yet. You'll be 101 years old on your deathbed. Maybe now I should start saying brachot on all of my food. You can't even eat anymore. Why don't we do things? Because we don't recognize how great we are. We don't see what we could accomplish. We don't know that there is greatness within that is unstoppable if we will just put our minds to it. There's a very touching story of a young boy by the name of Yoshua Leib. And one day in school, the principal, Rabbi Kurtzman, announced that tomorrow his class, there were three classes, they were going to begin learning Mishnayos, the Mishnayot. And there was going to be a big assembly. It's one of the greatest days in the life of a child. When he gets to that age, he's going to start learning like his tati, like his father. And there's going to be a big assembly, and Rabbi Kurtzman announced that the father of Yoshua Leib Levine, Rabbi Levine, is going to be the guest speaker in school that day. Yoshua Leib was so excited. They'd had other assemblies, other fathers had come in and spoken. It's like the great covet, the great honor for a kid. When your father walks in, at least when they're younger, the kids still think it's nice when their father walks in to speak. Some of my kids, if I'm supposed to speak by the school, I have to ask them permission. Is it okay? Do you mind if I come? The rabbi, Rosh Yeshiva asked me if it's okay? Yeah, okay. But when they're young, oh, wow, it's so exciting. Tati's coming in today. And the whole week, this kid was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, the day comes. And all the kids come to school dressed in their white shirts and their Shabbos clothes. And even though the assembly is not till the afternoon, Yoshua Leib cannot sit still the entire morning. He's bouncing around in his seat. He's looking at the clock. He's figuring out when his father's going to get there. And finally, the time of the assembly comes. And Rabbi Kurtzman gathers in the 3 classes of young boys that are there. And he introduces Rabbi Levine, and he tells him, before we start learning Mishnayos, we have the schus to hear from Rabbi Levine, who will tell us inspiring words about the power of Torah, about your learning. And Rabbi Levine comes up, and he mesmerizes the young boys. And he tells one story after another about all the great leaders of our generations, how they learned and what they gave over to their children, and young boys learning what it does in Shemayim. And the boys were hanging on the edge of their seat. At the end of his drasha, he looks around, and he doesn't see his son, Yoshua Leib. And he takes a double take. Where's my son? He was so excited. Where is he? Can't find him. He finishes in the auditorium and he starts walking down the hall. Figured maybe his son stepped out to go to the restroom or something. And suddenly as he passes by his son's classroom, he looks in and he sees that his son is learning with one of the older students who helps him work on his reading every day. And when he opened the door and his son saw his father and he looked at the clock, his son realized what happened and he broke down crying, inconsolable tears. You know when those kids, something happens, take away their Nintendo, they can't stop crying? This kid could not stop crying. And his father tells him it's okay, it was just a mistake. No, and the Rabbi Kurtzman must have sent him out right, or the Rabbi sent him out right before the assembly started. He goes to the office. The kid is crying buckets and buckets of tears. The father says, I can't do this. He calls his wife. He says, Mom, you have to come down to school right now. Yoshua Leib is miserable. He missed my speech. He missed the whole assembly. He's miserable. Come down here. The mother, Wonder Woman, comes running in. And she comes to her son, she tries to calm him down. Nothing doing. The kid does not stop crying. The mother's trying to keep her cool, as all mothers try to do, until she can't take it anymore. And she blurts out to Rabbi Kurtzman, Rabbi Kurtzman, how could you do this? My son was waiting the whole week for his father to come and speak. How could you do this? Now she was waiting to hear back from him, you know, you don't understand, it's going to be okay. But Rabbi Kurtzman looks at the mother and the father, and he sees this little boy crying uncontrollably. And he says, you're right. It's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. And because of that, we're going to do it all over again. And the mother says, you're going to do what all over again? You want my son to tell over the drasha? You want my husband to say the drasha? No. We're making the assembly of all of the classes all over again, and your husband, Rabbi Levine, will tell over his drasha to the children, this time with Yoshua Leib sitting right there next to him. So as every other class is already in their room getting ready to learn Mishnah for the first time, they sent a message, everybody back to the auditorium. And all the kids come back. And they're sitting there, and Rabbi Kurtzman gets up, and he says, you know, one of the most primary aspects of learning is something called chazorah, to review your studies. So we're going to start from the beginning of reviewing our studies. Rabbi Levine is once again going to tell us his beautiful drasha because his son Yoshua Leib missed it the first time. And Rabbi Kurtzman got up and he was so touched by the moment. And he said, besides the fact that we are learning how important it is to review your studies, Rabbi Kurtzman has taught us something even more valuable. And that is the value of every single Jewish child. More important than starting the Mishnah right now as you were supposed to is the value of the neshama of every single Jewish child. And that's the lesson my young man, he said, we have to take away from here today. Does anyone know how valuable they are? Do you know how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us? How much He believes in us? How much we can accomplish and we can do? Says Rabbi, if you will just understand the Erech Atzmai, you'll understand the tremendous abilities that you have. What you could accomplish in your life, you will certainly do so much more than you are doing today. Even if you think that you're doing a lot, you can always do more. But you have to believe in the koyach, in the strength, in the abilities that we have within. Rav Chaim Volozhin writes in his famous words in Nefesh HaChaim to drive home this idea and this point. V'zois toiras ha'adam. This is the credo, this is the message that a person should live with. Kol ish Yisrael, every single Jew. Al yoyma b'libo chas v'shalom. Don't say to yourself, God forbid. Kimani, what am I? What could I accomplish in this world? I'm a little Jew sitting in a place called Pico Robertson. On one side of me is kosher Mexican food. On the other side is kosher sushi. There's 1,000 shuls because everybody has to have their own shul. Nobody can get together. What can I do over here in Pico Robertson? What am I supposed to do? Chas v'shalom, says Rav Chaim Volozhin, a Jew should never say such words. Anam yovin v'yeda, you have to know and understand v'yikbu b'machshavos libo, and fix these words into your thoughts. Shekol protei masa v'dibor v'machshavosav. Everything that you do, your actions, v'diborov, and your speech, u'machshavosav, and your thoughts, koleis v'kol rega, every single moment, lo yisavidu chas v'shalom, they are never lost. They're never wasted. They are never overlooked by the Rebbeinu Shalom. When you stand in your living room at 9 o'clock in the morning after you did carpool in camp and the kids drove you absolutely insane, and you barely slept the night before, and you didn't have your 74-ounce latte yet in the morning, so you're really, really tired, but you finally have a free moment to daven, to pray to Hashem. You're not in the mood, your head is in 1,000 different places. You tell yourself, no, what's the big deal? So I won't daven right now. Because if I daven, it's going to be so fast, no meaning, no kavanah, no nothing. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chas v'shalom, please don't say that. I want you davening at 9 in the morning, at 9:30 in the morning, at 10 o'clock in the morning, at 12 o'clock in the morning. 2 minutes of your davening means the world to me, says the Rebbeinu Shalom. I don't care, you have kavanah, you don't have kavanah, you're in a good mood, you're in a bad mood, I don't care. I want to see you daven. I want to see you pray. I want to hear your voice. You tried 100 times, 1,000 times, 2,000 times to explain to your husband how to be a good husband. And he still he doesn't get it. Some people know what I'm talking about. He doesn't get it. And you're losing your patience. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't lose your patience. The wife of Rabbi Akiva had to wait 24 years to see the nachas from her husband. 24 years. She did not see him for 24 years. Maybe that would make it easier sometimes if you don't have to see him for 24 years. She had patience. She believed. She davened for his success. She knew how to talk to him. She was gentle. She was kind. She was encouraging. She made him a steak when he went to shul for the first time in 6 months, to tell him how proud she was of his accomplishments. Don't give up on another person. If that person sees how much that you believe in them, if they see how much you care about them, if they feel the ava, the love, because remember, every maise, every machshav, every thought, every word of speech that we say, it is never lost. It makes an impact in Shemayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses it to run the world, and it will make an impact in the life of another person as well. There is a beautiful Maisa that I saw recently in the city of Haifa in Eretz Yisrael. There is a big shul. Haifa, anybody that knows, is a very eccentric type of community. It's a very broad, I guess kind of like Pico Robertson. You can laugh, that was a joke. And there's a lot of different types, flavors, styles, everything different. And this one shul is like the center. Everybody goes to that shul. So the Rabbi of that shul, being very successful, every week that he's walking the shul on Shabbos, he sees right next to the shul, there's a clothing store that is open every single Shabbat. And it's driving him crazy. We're a shul, people are walking the shul, why can't this guy close the store? So, he goes the rabbinical route and he walks in the store and then he says, listen, Mr. Jew, do me a favor, he says, we're a shul right next door. Can you close down on Shabbos? That's always a great tactic. Just close your store on Shabbos. So the guy says, no, I'm not closing my store. Saturday, biggest day of the week for business. I'm not closing my store. Okay. Comes back another week and says, I have an idea. You don't want to close the whole Shabbos? How about just the hours that we are in shul so that my balabatim, my congregants, don't have to see the store open on Shabbos? So from 9 to 1 in the afternoon, keep the store closed. The guy says, no, 9 to 1, that's the best time of the day for selling clothing. Sorry, not closing the store. And it goes on like this for several months. And the rabbi keeps dropping into the store and talking to the owner, and the owner says, get out of here. I'm not closing my store. The rabbi doesn't know what to do. So he goes to the said Vishnitz Rebbe, who is the Rebbe in Haifa, to ask him for advice. What should he do? And he comes to the Rebbe and he tells him the whole story. We have a very big shul, successful shul, people coming. There's this one Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos. His store is right next to us. It's open every week, every Saturday. Why do my balabatim have to see the Chilul Shabbos, the desecration of the Shabbat every week? I want him to close the store. I tried, I went to him, I spoke to him. He doesn't listen. So Rebbe, what should I do? So the Rebbe looks at him and he says, do you love that Jew? And the rabbi was caught off guard. And he was very honest and he says, no, I don't love that Jew. He's driving me crazy. I asked him to close the store on Shabbat. He doesn't close the store. I asked him just between the times over there. He doesn't close the store. He annoys me. I don't love him. So the Rebbe told him, perhaps if this Jew, perhaps since that this Jew knows how much you don't love him, that is the reason that he refuses to listen to you and will continue to be mechalel Shabbat, desecrate Shabbos. But maybe if he would know how much you love him and how much you care about him, maybe it would change the way that he looks at everything. So the rabbi said, what am I supposed to do? He said, this week on Shabbos, I want you to go into a store and I want you to walk over to the owner and I want you to go over and tell him, I love you. If the Rebbe says, the Rebbe says. You don't have a choice. The next Shabbos, he's walking to shul, he's getting a little bit nervous over here. He's going towards the store. He opens the door. As he walks in, the owner begins yelling, I told you, get out of here! I'm not closing my store, stop it already! And the rabbi walks over and he says, I didn't come here to tell you to close the store. Oh no, really? So why did you come here? He said, I came here just to tell you that I love you. So the man looks at him and he says, why do you love me? He said, because you're a Jew, you're my brother, I know that you have a special, beautiful neshama inside, I love you, and I just want to give you a hug. And at that moment he proceeds to hug the owner of the store. The man begins to melt. And then he said, Shabbat Shalom, and he walked out. The next Shabbos, he comes into the store. This time the owner doesn't scream and yell. He walks right over to him again and he says, my dear friend, I love you, you're a Jew, you're so beautiful, you have such a wonderful neshama. I just want to give you another hug. And he hugs him again, and the same thing, the store owner is overwhelmed. The next week, the rabbi walks in. By this time, the owner is standing there like this, waiting for the hug. And it goes on like this for several months. Every week, the rabbi comes into the store, open on Shabbat, and he walks over to the owner. He says, I love you. I care about you. You're a beautiful Jew. And he hugs him and embraces him. After about 4 or 5 months, he's walking to shul. He comes to the door of the shop to go inside and say, I love you. And a big sign, closed for Shabbat. When another Jew knows that we believe in them, and we care about them, and we love them, and we see what they could accomplish and who they could be, it allows them to see the beauty that is there inside of themselves as well. And if a person could begin to see the goodness in themselves, you'll have a much easier time pulling out the goodness in other people as well. The Gemara tells us the following idea. The Gemara says that there were 2 figurines that were in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. And that was the Kruvim, the angelic little children that were there with their wings. And the Gemara says, Keitzad hein oimdim, how did these Kruvim stand? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yochanan Chad Omar once says, Pneim ish al ochiv. They face towards each other. How beautiful. You walk into the Holy of Holies, and you would see the Kruvim there, and they were looking at each other. One represents Hashem. The other one represents Klal Yisrael. They're in love with each other. V'chad Omar, but one says, Pneihem Labayis, they were facing away from each other. They were facing towards the Beis HaMikdash itself. So which way was it? Were they facing towards each other? Or were they facing away from each other? So the Gemara says, according to the one who says they were facing each other, what does he do with the verse that says, Peneyam Labais, they were facing towards the house, towards the Beis HaMikdash, not towards each other? And the Gemara says, Loi Kash, it's not a difficulty. Kan Bizman Shisol Oisin Ritzon Hashem. When the Jewish people will do the will of Hashem, we're keeping His mitzvahs, we're serving Hashem, we recognize our value, we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us so much, and we live our lives accordingly. So then, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are looking towards Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is looking towards us. However, when they're not facing each other, they're facing away, Kan bizman she'ein Yisrael oisim ritzoneh shel makom. That's when the Jewish people are not doing the will of Hashem. Yeshua HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you love Him. Show how much you care about Him. Show how much you're going to do His rots and His will. Hashem says, I'm right there with you. But when we turn our faces away from the Ribbono Shel Olam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu then turns His face, so to speak, away from us as well. The Gemara wants to know that at the time, well, let's go back first. The Gemara says like this: Amar Rabbi Ketina, B'shah Shah Yisrael Oilin L'Regel, when the Jewish people used to come up for the three festivals, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos, Megalelin Lehem Es HaPareiches, they would roll up the curtains to be able to show off the kruvim. And what would they see? Umarin Lehem Es HaKruvim, they would show them the kruvim, Shahayu Ma'orim Zeh B'Zeh. Not were they looking at each other. They were actually hugging each other. The greatest moment of the expression of our love for Hashem and the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had for us is when all of Klal Yisrael would come together at the Beis HaMikdash, come from near and far, and they would serve Hashem. Hashem says, at this moment, I love you so much, I care about you so much. They were wrapped in embrace. And the Kohanim would say, see how beloved you are in front of Hashem, like the love of a husband and a wife. That's how it's supposed to look. Husbands and wives are supposed to look at each other with love and respect and understanding and compassion and care. And therefore the eyes are always looking towards each other. When Klal Yisrael came like that dutiful wife to the Ribbono Shel Olam, and we were coming to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to show Him how much we love and we care about Him, He said, Ruchi baschem, look how much Hashem loves you. You are in an embrace. Now a person might think that's only during the good times in Klal Yisrael's history. When Klal Yisrael is there for the Chagim, for the festivals, that's when we can see the greatest moment of the Hiskalus, the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shechina, how much He cares about us and loves us. And so the Gemara asks right after that, and what did it look like when Klal Yisrael was going into the Galut, into the exile, when Hashem was getting the Beis HaMikdash destroyed by our enemies? How did we look at that moment? You ever see a couple who's struggling in Shalom Bayit? You ever see when you're not the rabbi, so you probably don't see it. They walk into the room, they're not talking to each other. They sit down in seats, they're not looking at each other. You go first, no, you go first, you go first. They don't talk to each other. So it's probably what it must have looked like. The kruvim must have been standing there. One was this way, one was that way. They're not even looking at each other at all. Says the Gemara, no, exactly the opposite. Omar Reish Lakish. When the Goyim, when the non-Jews entered into the sanctuary, and they revealed the kruvim that were there, Ro kruvim, hama'orim zeh bezeh, they saw the kruvim, they were hugging each other. As Klal Yisrael, who has just committed so many sins, done so much wrong, as they're heading off into the wilderness, into the exile. And you would think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't care about us anymore. Hashem says, as I took care of you in the wilderness for those 40 years, even when it was difficult, you should know I never left your side for a moment. And therefore we look and we see the embrace, the love. But it's not just HaKadosh Baruch Hu hanging on to us. It's Klal Yisrael hanging on to the Ribbono Shel Olam. Because at that moment in our history, We realize to ourselves, if only we would have showed more love. If only we would have done more for the Ribbono Shel Olam. If only we would have served him better. If only we would have done more mitzvot. If only we would have been kinder and done more chesed. If only. And now it's too late. We're going into the exile. So we're grabbing on. You know, it's like when your relatives come from out of town and you have to take them to the airport, like your whole Pesach you spent together. Mama June, Baba June came in from Shiraz. And now you have to drop them back off at the airport. The crying that goes on at that airport. And you know how to really cry good. They cry at that airport. And they're hugging on. They can't let go. Oh, no, no, no. And the stewardess is like pulling them away. The plane is about to take off. Klal Yisrael is going into Golus. They're going into the exile at this moment. And they realize they're losing their deepest connection in the world to the Ribbono Shel Olam. And when you lose your connection to Hashem, you lose your connection to yourself. And when you lose your connection to yourself, you lose your connection to everybody else around you. And they're clinging to Hashem, and Hashem is clinging to them. And He's telling them, don't worry. Wherever you are going to go in the Golus, wherever you will go in that exile, in the darkness, when it's so uncertain and so unsure, trust me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm holding on to you. I am with you. I am hugging you every single step of the way. There's a fellow who passes through our shul from time to time. He and his wife are amazing people. They became Bali Tshuva after they had children and raised their children. They lived in Denver, Colorado. They got caught up in the fervor of the purity of the Jewish community over there. And they became religious. Their kids, their son and daughter who were teenagers, thought their parents had gone crazy. And they didn't follow along with their parents' choice in life. But it didn't stop the parents. They went and they became not just from very, very from people. He goes and he learns every single day, hours on end. She's a big macher over there in the community, very much involved, doing chesed and tzedakah and Torah and learning and sponsoring shiurim and you name it. At a certain point, they said, you know what our dream is? Our dream is to make Aliyah and move to Eretz Yisrael. Our kids, anyway, are taken care of here in America. Daughter does this, the son does that. We don't have nothing here and really anymore to stay for. Let's go and move to Eretz Yisrael. So they packed up their bags, and they made Aliyah, and they moved, I think, to Rechavia in Eretz Yisrael. And from time to time, why does he come to Los Angeles? Because I believe his mother-in-law lives there, and they come to visit their parents. And every time he comes back, he's like shining more and more and more and more. They had their house in Denver. They kept it because they were still traveling through. They had business to tie up and everything like that. And finally decided, you know what? We have made Aliyah. We're there in Eretz Yisrael. We're not coming back to America. Let's sell the house. They put the house up for sale. And it's on the market for a little bit of time. And suddenly they get an offer. And the offer is a wonderful offer. They decide, we're going to take the offer. They start packing up the house. It is the night before escrow is about to close. They've already sold off a lot of their furniture. They're preparing for their eventual complete aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. And the husband comes into the kitchen and he sees his wife sitting at the table and she is bawling, she is crying. And he thinks to himself, why is my wife crying? And he says she must be crying because once we sell this house, that's like the last connection of Gashmis that we have to this world. The house, he said, was a beautiful house. It was remodeled. It was done with exactly the way that she wanted it. She probably felt bad that they're going to sell the house. They're going to go live in their small apartment in Eretz Yisrael. It won't be the same. So he says to his wife, why are you crying? What's the matter? We're selling the house. We got such a good price for it. We're going to make money. We'll go to Eretz Yisrael. He said, you don't understand. She said, we're going to have to come back to America every once in a while, aren't we? You'll have business, we'll have things we have to take care of, things we have to do. She said, all of our friends who live in Israel, when they come back to America, where do they stay? She said, they stay by their children. Children live in New York, this one lives over here in Baltimore, this one lives in Los Angeles. Wherever they go, they always have children that they can go to, they stay, they spend time with the grandchildren and their children. She says to her husband, our children are not married. Our daughter didn't find her b'sheret yet. Our son didn't find his b'sheret yet. She said, when we come back to America, where do we always go? We always come home here and our children come to us. If we sell the house right now, where are our children going to go so that they can spend time with us? And she begins crying. She says, I can't sell the house. And he looked at his wife and he said, you're right. And he called the real estate broker on the spot and he said, please pull out of escrow. We can't sell our house. We need the house for our children. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says over the following to Klal Yisrael. Don't worry. I didn't give up the house completely. It might be lying in ruins. We might not have Kohanim doing the Avodah. The Levim might not be singing their beautiful shiurim, their songs. There might not be a place where I, the Shekhinah, can go and rest my Shekhinah upon everybody. However, I didn't give up that piece of property over there on our Abayis is where one day, says the Ribbono Shel Olam, I will come back and I will land the Bayis Shlishi, the third Beis HaMikdash, and I'll invite all of the children, all of the broken souls, all the neshamas that are searching, all the people that were wandering in the gutters for thousands and thousands of years. You will all come back to the Beis HaMikdash. We will sing together, we will dance together, we will cry together. Do you know what tears of joy every single Jew is going to shed at that moment? All the things that we thought in our life were the worst will turn out they were the best. All of the pain that we went through in our lives. I was once in the room with a woman who was suffering from cancer, Rahman al-Islam, Lo Aleinu. She was in the final days of her life. And she was lying in the bed with a glow of Kedusha circumferencing her head. She was not even a religious woman. And she told me, you know, the conservative rabbi just came here. And he asked me such a silly question. He asked me if I was scared of where I'm going. And I said, scared? I'm not scared. I'm sitting here surrounded by my children. I'm here surrounded by my grandchildren. I'm going to a place where I know it's a better world. I'm not scared. I am happy and I'm at peace. And I told her, Miss, Gloria was her name. I said, Gloria, you should know that every ounce of suffering that you had here in this world, it translates into bracha, into blessing in the world to come. Do you know how much joy you're going to have? You're going to see the hardest moments of your life is what made you who you are and gave you the biggest bracha in the next world. May we be Zeichim Yirtz Hashem that this should really be the last Yom Iyun that we have to sit here and talk about there is no Beis HaMikdash. We have to speak about rebuilding ourselves. We'll just talk about what it's like to live in a world with a Beis HaMikdash, Be'ez Hashem. And all of you should have tremendous hatzlacha, the bracha, that you should be able to find the erich atzmo, the true value that is there inside of yourselves. And when you find the value that is inside of yourself, you can then help to show other people the value that is inside of them. And if we will see the value in ourselves and others, then we will see the value in the struggles of the galut, of the exiles that we have to go through. And we'll recognize the embrace of the Rebbeinu Shalom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu thanks us for never leaving Him. And we will be zeicha to be mekadesh Shem Shemayim, to sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu everywhere that we go. And we should be zeicha, all of us, to see the bias, goyal tzedek, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, b'mheira v'yameinu.